Hello and welcome. I'm Asuma Katauka and you are watching NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top stories. The United States and European Union have reached a trade deal framework, ending a months-long standoff. The agreement includes a 15% U.S. tariff on EU goods, half of the threatened 30%, with zero tariff access for certain U.S. exports to Europe. Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni called the new EU-US trade deal a positive step, but has urged for greater clarity on its terms. Prime Minister Meloni also said the 15% import tariff is sustainable only if it includes previously agreed tariffs and clear exemptions for agricultural products. Thailand and Cambodia have now agreed to a ceasefire deal. This was facilitated in Malaysia by Malaysian Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim amid border clashes. China and US have also expressed support for diplomatic efforts to de-escalate tensions. The ceasefire deal comes as this conflict already claimed dozens of lives and displaced over 130,000 people. UN aid chief calls for a permanent ceasefire in Gaza, not just a pause, as restrictions ease and over 100 truckloads of aid are collected. Trump says Israel will have to make decisions on the situation, while the WHO warns malnutrition has reached alarming levels in Gaza. Ukraine has now signed its first natural gas import deal with Azerbaijan's Sojar via the Trans-Balkan route, according to a statement made by Naftogaz. The test shipment is being delivered through the Bulgaria-Romania-Ukraine corridor, marking a new energy cooperation pathway. Six people have been killed in a shooting in Ortor produce market in Bangkok. Among six is also the shooter. He killed 5 others and then followed to kill himself. Local police have now confirmed this was not a random attack and it did not include any tourists. The United Nations climate chief has urged Australia and Turkey to end their 2-year standoff over who will host the COP31 climate summit, calling the ongoing delay unhelpful and unnecessary. Both countries submitted bids in 2022 but have failed to reach a compromise, missing a June deadline for a decision. Google has now admitted that its Android earthquake alert system failed to properly warn millions during Turkey's devastating 7.8 magnitude earthquake back in 2023. According to media investigation, only 469 take-action warnings were sent despite 10 million people being within the range, revealing flaws in what Google describes as a global safety net. Malaysian Prime Minister has announced that Thailand and Cambodia have now agreed to an immediate and unconditional ceasefire, beginning at midnight local time. Both countries have committed to resume direct communications between their prime ministers, foreign ministers, and defense ministers. Acting Prime Minister Phuntham Wechayachai has said that Thailand has agreed to the ceasefire and expressed that it will be carried out successfully in good faith by both sides. The Cambodian Prime Minister noted that over 300,000 people have been displaced due to this conflict, but expressed hope that the fighting will end immediately. He also said that he believes this will provide people on both sides to return to normalcy. He expressed deep appreciation for U.S. President Donald Trump for his decisive mediation and thanked the Chinese government for their effort and participation. The Cambodian Prime Minister also thanked acting Thai Prime Minister for his positive role in the constructive dialogue. Now we are joined by retired Major General Gigi Devedi. He's a defense analyst, joins us live from New Delhi. Thank you for joining us today. Welcome to NewsX World.
Thank you.
Now, how significant is this news and what's your reaction?
Well, I think this news is very significant because it was anticipated that either the hostility could escalate or some peace effort will fructify. And I think this comes as a great relief that these two countries, that is Thailand and Cambodia, which had been clashing for last 3 days, and this is the good effort of Malaysian Prime Minister, and he has been able to institute at least an unconditional ceasefire, because fighting between these two countries is not in the interest of either these two countries or the region at large. So I think that this unconditional ceasefire comes as a great relief. It should hold on. And the issue of border, which is actually lingering on for more than a century now, should be resolved amicably. And to that extent, both China and US also have played their part. They have welcomed the ceasefire, and also they have pressed on that dialogue is the way forward and not the clashes or the armed use of force to settle the conflict. So all I can say is that this comes as a great relief. The unconditional ceasefire must hold on, and the dialogue must start so that this issue of border is resolved amicably, which is good for these two countries and for Southeast Asia region at large.
And Major General, so U.S. and China voiced their opinion on this ceasefire. What are their role, and why did they interfere in this?
Oh, well, that's a very interesting question. Firstly, let's take China. China has good relation with both. With Thailand, they have a huge trade that is about $128 billions. And as far as Cambodia is concerned, it is their ally, and China has a naval base at Reims, and therefore they have a strategic interest. So it was in interest of China that both the countries do not actually escalate, and the issue should be resolved amicably. And that's why China was interested, because it has a lot to lose as far as trade is concerned with Thailand, and as far as its strategic relation concerned with Cambodia. Now comes America. America also has a deep relationship with Thailand. In fact, most of the Thai weapon systems are American, and they do series of exercises, military exercises, and therefore America also didn't want the conflict to escalate, because that would invite China, and they don't want like Chinese to come in and act as a negotiator, arbitrator of the dispute. So America was also interested that these two countries solve the issue amicably. So both the superpowers have the interest in this region, and that's why they had taken interest and also pressed on for dialogue and not the use of force to sort out this border problem.
And now, with direct communication channels between Thailand and Cambodian leaders resuming, now what are the key diplomatic steps that are needed to make sure that this ceasefire stays intact?
Well, first and foremost, I think the leaders of both the countries must issue clear orders to the defense forces, because many a time the orders do not get percolated, and the local commanders do not actually see the bigger picture. So I think first and foremost, both the sides, the leaders of both the sides must communicate to the armed forces that they should stop fighting and that they should actually step back. Second is disengagement, because once the forces are facing each other, their fingers on trigger, so therefore the clashes can start again. So second would be the disengagement of these forces, so that there's no possibility of clashes, because as I said, that disengagement would be next step. And third step would be the political leadership will come on the negotiation table and put across their point of view, put across their arguments. And as Malaysia is actually mediating, so these two sides will be brought on the table, and they'll try to find an amicable solution to the border issue. So three steps. Firstly, clear instructions to the armed forces, disengage, and then begin the process of negotiation. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Retired Major General Gigi Dwivedi, for sharing that insight. Please stay with us as we'll come back to you for our next discussion. Now we move on. The US and EU have reached a major new trade agreement with key impacts on autos, energy, and agriculture. President Donald Trump has confirmed a 15% tariff that will hit EU exports, including autos. The trade deal continues to spark strong reactions. Talks are still ongoing over possible tariff exemptions for wines and spirits, according to EU officials. Russia has commented on the deal, calling it a heavy blow to European industry and warning of further deindustrialization. France's industry and trade ministers called the agreement unbalanced and stressed this is not the end of the story. They've demanded fairer terms and stronger negotiating stance against the U.S. Germany's economy minister, Robert Reich, welcomed the deal but said several sectors would need to adapt. He called the agreement vital given today's global economic pressures. Negotiations are set to continue in the coming weeks. Now we're joined by Keith Vaz. He's a former UK minister, joins us live from London. Thank you for joining us today. Good to see you. Now, how big or how significant is this agreement for both the countries?
Good morning from London. These are the two biggest economies in the world, the EU with its 27 countries and the United States. So any deal that they both say is a good deal must be by its nature a good deal. Remember, Donald Trump is in Scotland, in the United Kingdom, on holiday, and he's, in a sense, interrupted his golf holiday to conclude these arrangements. Now, what was interesting is the body language of Ursula von der Leyen, the president of the Commission, during the discussion. She wasn't arguing with him when he said this is a great deal for the United States. She said it was a tough negotiation, but she accepted what was being said. That's why what we've just heard from the French minister is very interesting, that there is more to discuss on this matter. So I would imagine they would have to discuss more. This is not the end of the process. Not a single shipment has been made under the new arrangements, but this is the framework that has been agreed. And I think in this day and age, everyone wants a deal. So they have a deal. What this deal means for the ordinary consumer in Europe and America is something we will have to wait and see.
And now, sir, looking at this deal, just like you've also mentioned that some EU leaders, while welcoming this deal, they have also kind of shown their discontent with this deal. Why is that? Where is that coming from among EU leaders?
Well, it's because, of course, the EU at prime ministerial level is represented by the President of the Council of Ministers, who was not there at the arrangement. This is the Commission meeting with the President of the United States, and that is because trade is an issue that is dealt with by one person on behalf of 27 countries. So you're quite right that there is concern. The Italians, the French in particular, will want to have things to say about this, especially the massive investment, and it's massive, that the Europeans will have to make into the United States. Now, when these negotiations are over, and they began on the first day that Donald Trump was president, when he started imposing tariffs, we will have to see where the balance sheet lies. Donald Trump's aim is to reduce his trade deficit. The aim of the EU is to sell as much as it can. Now, since, of course, Donald Trump came to power for the second time, countries have been seeking other partners. For example, last week, Keir Starmer, the British Prime Minister, struck a deal with the Indian Prime Minister, Narendra Modi. So while this is ongoing, there are other deals that have been done elsewhere, and I think that will continue. What I'd like to see at the end of the year is the balance sheet. And the balance sheet is, has America's trade deficit changed as a result of these agreements? If it hasn't, then all he'll do is he'll tear up the arrangement and come back and ask for more. So this is something we need to bear in mind. At the moment, these are just numbers and figures. Everyone has learnt that if they're doing a press conference with Donald Trump, they don't speak. And Ursula von der Leyen, who usually is quite a talker, didn't say very much. And if you look at her body language, you will see that she was pretty stiff in her negotiations. She didn't say anything that was going to spoil Donald Trump's golf holiday. So I think we're going to have to wait and see what the balance sheet says at the end of the day. But speaking as a former Europe minister, one of the reasons why Britain left the EU is because we didn't want one person like Ursula von der Leyen negotiate on behalf of 27 nations. We wanted to do negotiations ourselves. I was, of course, against Brexit, but this is an example of how these things are worked out. So we'll have to wait and see what the balance sheet says at the end of the year.
Yes, thank you very much for joining us as always. Great to hear from you. That was Keith Vazis, a former UK minister, joined us live from London. Now we move on to our next news. In a powerful call to action, United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres is urging the world to reject the use of hunger as a weapon of war. He warned that conflict from Gaza to Sudan is driving life-threatening hunger. Let's listen into what he has said.
This is not just a crisis of scarcity. It is a crisis of equity and climate. Nearly 40% of the global workforce is linked to food systems, yet many remain trapped in poverty. Climate change is disrupting harvests, supply chains, and humanitarian response. Conflicts continues to drive hunger from Gaza to Sudan and beyond. Hunger feeds further instability and undermines peace. We must never accept hunger as a weapon of war.
His message comes amid growing international concern over the humanitarian crisis in Gaza, where aid agencies say relief deliveries remain far below what's needed. Despite the easing of Israel's blockade, the Israeli government, meanwhile, denies using hunger as a tactic and blames aid groups for failing to distribute supplies. Now we're joined by Thomas Porteous. He's an anchor and correspondent at NewsX World. Thomas, what more can you tell us about this news coming in?
Antonio Guterres, the head of the UN, certainly has expressed his concern before about the crisis going on in Gaza. However, he is not the only one, with growing pressure coming from even Israel's allies now, which has now led to Israel allowing the resumption of aid. Many critics say that it is a simple, direct response of all, not just Israel's allies, but all around the world. That includes Western nations, that includes people in BRICS. Everyone is seeing these images of Gaza and realizing that there is a humanitarian crisis going on. This blockade by Israel has been in place for 5 months now, only letting a limited amount of aid trickle in through a controversial organization called the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, where over 1,000 deaths have reportedly been linked to. Reports of shelling going on while civilians are attempting to get aid, reports of both US contractors and Israeli soldiers open firing into crowds of those desperately seeking things like flour, things like pharmaceuticals, health, things to help with health. There has been all sorts of responses from the international community for this, but wide condemnation from some people who were former allies of the Israeli government. People like France have now recognized Palestine as a state, or going to recognize Palestine as a state in September at the United Nations. There is also a call for the United Kingdom, who's now 2/3 of Parliament have signed a letter directly to the UK government in support of that motion. Images of this conflict have been all over our screens for months now, and for some, certainly for the people of Gaza, this response may come as too late.
Thank you so much, Thomas, for sharing that insight. Now we move on to our next news. Iran has responded to United Nations criticism over its rising execution numbers, defending the death penalty as legal and necessary. Foreign Ministry spokesman Ismail Baqi said that the death penalty is permitted under Iranian law and is used only for the most serious crimes. He added that the judiciary is working to restrict its application to extreme offenses. His remarks follow a sharp rebuke from the UN, which recorded over 600 executions in Iran in the first half of the 2025. The UN has also called for an immediate moratorium, raising concerns about fair trials and a lack of transparency in the judicial process. Here's what the Iranian Foreign Ministry spokesman had to say.
اعدام در قوانین داخلی ایران برای مجموعه‌ای از شدیدترین جرائم در قانون پذیرفته شده است. در خیلی کشورهای دیگه هم مجازات اعدام پیش بینی شده، اما تلاش قوه قضاییه ما این هست که این موارد رو محدود بکنه به جنایات یا جرائم خیلی شدید.
Now we go back to our discussion with Tom Porteous. He's the anchor and correspondent. Thomas, what more can you tell us about this situation?
Well, the situation is alarming, Asuma. This time last year, in terms of how far we are into 2025, the number of executions in Iran has doubled. Now, 40% of these executions around are for that of drug offences. Other offences include vague accusations, including insult to God. Humanitarian foundations are not sure what these mean. And given Iran's position in the world, it's hard to get this information directly out of the Iranian government. One pretty controversial case that happened just a couple of days ago, where two men were executed without trial. The UN voiced their concern over this trial, and as these executions continue, they will continue to ring alarm bells, as will other humanitarian foundations around the world.
Thank you very much for sharing that, Thomas Porteous. Now we move on to our next news. China has criticized Japan for allowing Taiwan's foreign minister to visit, calling it a provocative move. Beijing says the visit undermines its sovereignty and violates diplomatic agreements between the two countries. The Chinese Foreign Ministry has lodged formal protests in both Tokyo and Beijing. Officials say Japan's actions could embolden Taiwan's pro-independence movement and damage regional stability. China has warned Japan to act cautiously on Taiwan-related issues and not test its resolve. The Foreign Ministry stressed that any signal supporting Taiwan independence will be met with strong opposition from Beijing. Here's what the Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson had to say.
重错误信号，中方强烈不满，坚决反对，已经在北京和东京向日方严正交涉，提出强烈。中方敦促日方恪守中日4个政治文件精神和所作郑重承诺，深刻反省历史，汲取历史教训，在台湾问题上谨言慎行，不得以任何形式损害中国主权，不得向台独分裂势力发出任何错误信号，不要低估中国人民捍卫国家主权和领土完整的坚强决心、坚定意志和强大能力。
Now we're back, joined by retired Major General Gigi Dwivedi. He's a defense analyst, joins us live from New Delhi. Thank you, Major General, for staying with us. Now, this is a delicate situation for Japan as well as Taiwan. How should Japan navigate this diplomatic relationship with China while balancing its support for Taiwan?
Well, that's a very, very intricate question because, first and foremost, Chinese are very, very sensitive to any diplomatic contact with Taiwanese government. And they take a very serious view, and they feel that any diplomatic contact means they are encouraging the split or the separatist or independence of Taiwan. So therefore, it's a very, very sensitive issue. And secondly, Japan has a issue with China on the Senkaku Islands, which are being claimed by Chinese and which Japanese also claim. So not only Taiwan, there's a tension between China and Japan on the Senkaku Islands. And the third very important point is that there is a strategic ambiguity as to what will be the Americans or the Japanese response if there is a direct threat to Taiwan from China. Now, Chinese always have very, very sensitive approach to any diplomatic contact between Taiwan and any other country, be it Japan, be it any other country. So therefore, they are very sensitive. And Japanese have handled this issue, as I said, through the strategic ambiguity, while they maintain cultural contact, trade contact, but they have generally tried to shy away or try to not make it very open about the diplomatic dealings with Taiwan. So this is how the policies have been both by America and also by Japan, that while they keep or maintain trade and cultural contact, but they generally avoid diplomatic dealings. And in this case, if the foreign minister has gone in and met the Taiwanese, then that means, as far as Chinese are concerned, this is a crossing a red line. And I'm sure that this will get diffused, but these diplomatic rows take place off and on, and this is part of the very delicate diplomacy.
Yes, indeed. And Major General, also now looking at China's criticism over this. So what are the potential consequences for regional stability if Japan continues to engage with Taiwan's leadership in this manner?
Well, Chinese have a number of ways they express their disapproval on such issues. Firstly, they try to bring pressure on Taiwan, and they do a number of military drills or even air intrusion on the economic, that is the, they have a no-fly zone, so they do that. And also with the Japanese, there is a diplomatic war that takes place, diplomatic rows. It is a part of diplomatic, tension does get created. And they do also try to take certain punitive measures as far as the economic or trade is concerned. So Chinese have a number of ways that they express a disapproval, like, when the Americans, they had deployed the THAAD system in South Korea, the Chinese had then weaponized the economic and trade. So Chinese have a number of ways to do that. They do use diplomacy. They also go on to weaponize trade and take some punitive action. But this kind of thing has been off and on. It's not something very sensational. It's a kind of a matter which has been routinely handled. And I'm sure even this now, it will be handled very, very discreetly. And the issues do get raised and then they mellow down. This is how the diplomacy works in the South China Sea, in East China Sea, and across the Taiwan Strait, and also between South Korea, Japan, and America. These are the issues which are blow hard and blow cold, I would say. But in time to come, they get settled diplomatically. Over to you.
Thank you very much, retired Major General Gigi Dwivedi, for joining us and sharing your insight as a defense analyst. Now we move on to our next news. Google has admitted that its Android earthquake alert system has failed to accurately warn people ahead of the devastating Turkey earthquake of 2023. The twin quakes measuring 7.8 and 7.5 in its magnitude struck southern Turkey and northern Syria in the early hours of February 6th, killing more than 55,000 people and injuring over 1 lakh. Despite being fully operational, Google's system underestimated the severity of the first 7.8 magnitude quake. According to the company, only 469 highest priority take action alerts were sent out, though as many as 10 million people near the epicenter were eligible. Instead, around 500,000 users received a lower-level Be Aware warning designed only for light shaking, which does not override Do Not Disturb settings or issue loud alerts. Well, that's all we have time for. We will continue to bring more news updates from around the world. News.